It really changed the way I look at cocktail development. Just as a kind of a high level takeaway for anybody listening is when you have a syrup, it's usually front palate. It usually hits big in the front and then tapers off. And then with the infusion, that is not front palate. It is more mid to late palate. So now you can start layering flavors in.
Thank you for listening to Serves You Right. My name is Andrew, and today we get a chance to talk to Chris Tunstall. Chris got his start cleaning restaurants in the dead of night as a kid. From the humble beginnings there, he's grown, he's learned, he's conquered the bar world, put together a bar above, a huge media empire that spawns a YouTube channel, podcast, courses, and of course, the barware. Super fascinating guy, super knowledgeable, and a really fantastic conversation. I love meeting people with his kind of energy. This is my kind of guy. So without any further ado, here's Chris Tunstall, and my name again is Andrew. Thank you for listening to Serves You Right. Let's get into it. Service starts now. Chris Tunstall of The Bar Above. Thank you for coming on and talking to us today.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for the invitation. I'm looking forward to it.
So I thought it'd be fun for the listener, especially the listener that may not know about you or Bar Above. Could you tell us the story of how you ended up running such a cool thing, for bartenders, servers, everyone?
Yeah, man. So I can do the long story or the short story.
Do the long story. We'll ask questions, make it longer.
Okay, cool, man. All right. So my parents owned a janitorial company when I was a young kid, probably like 10 years old. So if you've ever been to Chili's in Southern California, we cleaned a lot of the restaurants at night. Chili's all the way from Orange County up to San Bernardino, 7 days a week. So on my summer breaks, I was helping. They would drop a 10-year-old off in a restaurant, lock the door, come back 4 hours later, and my job was to clean that restaurant. So sometimes the morning crew would come in, and I was really kind of awestruck by these guys. You got to remember that I'm like a early 10-year-old, maybe teenager at this point, and the people that are coming in on a Saturday morning are kind of like celebrities to me, man. They're like, good looking, they're tall, they got their things together, they've had a rough night partying, and I'm like, these guys are awesome, man. This is cool.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it's like the rock stars of my generation, basically. So I just kind of had that formative moment in hospitality, and I got to see a little bit behind the scenes pretty early on. But janitorial work it's hard work. So I kind of did some other things, did a lot of customer service jobs, and went to college for biology. Basically, I want to do virology and study genomics and genetics, and I had an idea for running my own company. So I always had that idea of running my own company in the back of my head because my parents did it, and I grew up in that environment. And one of my jobs was moving to Las Vegas and becoming a limo driver and a craps dealer. So for anybody that's not familiar with craps, you get the two dice. You see it in the movies. Everybody's going crazy. It's this real, yeah, exactly. Roll of seven, the whole 9 yards. It is the most exciting place in the entire casino if you're winning money. And so the whole environment of being a dealer in that area is so filled with chaos that it's really hard to keep focus and do your job because there's just so much going on. You're dealing with 9 to 10 players, on standard is 8, but when it's crazy, up to 10 players with bets all over the board. And so you have to have this really controlled system of working through the entire game in a very fast-paced environment with all the distractions in the world around you. And I loved it. I think I should have taken this.
It's like bartending on steroids. It's all the pressure of a Friday night well shift, but everyone is waiting for not a drink, but $10,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is 100% bartending on steroids, and it's just 8 hours. You're just getting hammered for 8 hours. And I should have taken this early on as a sign of like my ADHD, but I was like, I love this. I can't get enough of it. So I just thrived in the environment. And then I was doing it for about 3 years. And I started looking around some of the older guys that have been doing this for a lot longer, and it was dark, man. They weren't happy people. They were all bitter, and there just wasn't a lot of joy in their lives. And I was like, that's my road. If I keep being here, I have to get out of this. So then I ended up in Northern California, and I didn't know what to do. And I was going to college, trying to finish off my career or my education. And I was trying to figure out what I could replace that adrenaline rush with, that vibe. I was like, hey, I remember bartenders, like they're the coolest guys in the room. I'm going to go do that because I'm the dorkiest guy in every room I walk into. So at least I'll get some social skills. Mm-hmm. So I started attending bar in 93. And this is when, early in my career, I started hearing the word mixology. And so I was like, I need to know what this is. And I kept hearing it more and more. And it was only on the fringe at this point. And I found this website, I think it was like Chowhound or something early in the day. And there was a handful of people in New York, London, and San Francisco actively talking on this chat board about mixology, techniques, processes, and nowhere else. And so I started really diving into learning as much as I possibly could, because I really felt like this was going to be something that was going to be really big. And from my science background, I could understand a lot of the variables that they were talking about. So that's kind of when it piqued my interest. And then I graduated college, but I was tending bar at that time. And I absolutely fell in love with it. It was everything I thought it was going to be, and even more when you added the creativity of coming up with your own cocktails into the whole mix. You had that chaos, you had the systems, you had the adrenaline, you had everything, and then you add a layer of creativity, and it was like, this is my new home. I'm here. Yeah. I've arrived.
And not every girl thinks you're cool, but maybe one or two do. Enough.
Exactly.
Yes.
But yeah, that's kind of what got me started in tending bar. And then the whole craft cocktail mixology scene, I wanted to really get better at it. And I knew if I wasn't in San Francisco or New York, then I wasn't going to be exposed to cutting edge techniques or even any technique. And I was up in Napa at this point, and I'd been paying attention, and I thought I knew a lot. And so I was like, all right, it's time for me to make the move. And so San Francisco's right here. I'm going to move to San Francisco. And when I got my first bartending job, it was pretty apparent that I didn't know anything. And this is before julep strainers even existed in mass bartending. If you found a bar spoon, it had a little red cap on it, and that was it. And your access to knowledge was limited to the people that you worked with, and that was it. And so it was very kind of gatekeepy at that point. And I remember walking in and somebody's like, make me an old fashioned. And so I grabbed some fruit, I muddled it up and, did the whole thing. And they're like, that's not an old fashioned. And they would criticize me and berate me, but then they would never show me the proper way to make one. And so I was like, this sucks. I hate this. And that's basically the starting point of a bar above, was like, it doesn't have to be this way. If people could just communicate proper technique, recipes, and all this, and just share it with the world, this is going to be a lot better experience for everybody. So that was kind of the mission when I started off, is just sharing cutting edge techniques to people anywhere that wants to get access to it. So that's kind of what started. And then at this point, I've been developing a lot of cocktails, and in the back of my head, I always thought I'm going to do a cocktail series on how to construct cocktails from like an abstract to reality, and I'm going to put it out on a DVD set, because that's exactly what was happening at my point in mid 90s. At this point,
you could be older, you could say VHS, so things could be worse.
Right, yeah. Exactly. But this is what was happening in the world of flair, and I was like, well, there's a model for it. I'm going to do that. And then I met my girlfriend at the time, wife now, Julia, and kind of told her about everything I was working on. She's like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I was like, that's the only thing I got. And she goes, well, okay, here's another idea. And so that's where the YouTube channel started. And that's where the idea of doing, giving away content on YouTube for free and all this stuff. And that's kind of what started. So back in 2000, I think it was 13, we bought a house in the East Bay because our landlord in San Francisco wouldn't let us build a bar in our 700 square foot home for filming. So then we built a bar in the East Bay and just started producing a lot more YouTube. She developed the website, and I started doing content. And so that's kind of what started everything, was that wanting to make access to knowledge easier, better, and more friendly.
Yeah. No, and that makes a lot of sense. It's good reminder for me, because even after looking you up, I still think of you mostly as a product source, because that's where I mostly interact with a bar above stuff.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, providing that knowledge, especially if you come from the time, and you're like, I entered the bar scene 2008 and 9. So there was some progress. So it was still early-ish.
Sure.
But I mean, back when you were starting, which wasn't that much before, I mean, it's easy to forget now, but there was a time when fresh juice was revolutionary. There was a time when TGI Fridays was like the thing, you know? Yeah.
No, and I remember, like, I was investigating this whole area, learning about it. And to your point, sweet and sour was the gold standard in every bar I've ever worked with before that. And so the first time I had to make my own, fresh squeezed lemon juice, I was like, this is intense, man. I don't know how to balance this stuff. So, and that's where we were as an industry back then. Like, we didn't even understand fresh juice. And so I remember walking through San Francisco which was kind of that hub I was telling you about, and seeing in the window of this bar, somebody hand wrote mixologist on duty. And I was like, wow, that's weird. So I was like, all right, I got to see what this is about. And it was the simple act of just fresh juice was transformative, like just that one moment. So yeah, there was a lot of learning that we did as an industry from that point to where we are now, honestly.
No, and it's hard to remember just because things change so slowly that it has changed so much.
Yeah,
I did
exactly.
want to double click on something you said that really resonated with me. So I remember too that moment. I wasn't cleaning the restaurant, but I remember when I was serving in the restaurant, that group of bartenders that I saw that I was like, I want to be like them. You know, like the really cool head
Right.
bartender, the girl that I was just like, man, she is cute. Like I remember those guys that inspired me. And getting into the bar, I found very quickly, I think probably similar to you, that I just am a little awkward. I'm a little nerdy. You know, like I was never going to be that guy that got by just on my charm and good looks, what little I have. But I did quickly find out that I could compensate for what I lacked there with competency, like learning the
Mhm.
drinks, doing a good job, working fast. And I wonder, did you find a similar path yourself? Or was that was just kind of a throwaway statement when you said that and it just kind of resonated with me?
Well, and I think mine was very similar, like, but I was trying to be very deliberate about increasing my social skills. So this was more of a challenge I set for myself of like, if I pin my ability to feed myself with my ability to talk to people, I'm going to figure it out. Right. And so that was my personal challenge of like, okay, I need to become a lot more socially skilled. And so that's what really drove me. And so every day was an experiment for me of like, all right, today I'm going to work on this. Today I'm going to work on this. And you forget about it when you're doing it like after 2 months or 3 months. And so it just becomes normal at this point. But it was a deliberate decision I made of like, okay, I need to become more sociable. I need to work on my charm. I need to work on my comfort in front of people because I was very, very shy in high school. And so that's kind of the challenge I set for myself of like, okay, I'm going to starve if I don't figure this out. I'm going to figure it out. And the only way I know how to do it is throw myself in the deep end. So that's kind of the nexus of it. And then everything else on top of that was marginal increases, marginal incremental benefits from that point on.
Sure, sure. And I mean, you talking through that does sound like a much better way of approaching it. I feel like I got there in a slight way, but yours sounds more methodical and thought through. Probably points to the fact that you own a successful business now and I just talk to people on the internet. But fair enough, you know.
Well, and I think my scientific background kind of came into it a little bit of like,
Yeah.
all right, let's set a system down.
Oh
Let's test
yeah.
the system, rinse, repeat, get
Hypothesis,
better, better, better.
did this work? No, run it again. Yeah. Fair
Right.
enough.
Exactly. Yeah. Scientific method. Yep.
Okay. So you're giving away free info on YouTube. You're building this website. When did the courses come in? Or like is that the correct evolution? Were the tools before or how did that work?
The tools actually came afterwards. So
Okay.
the courses were kind of my white whale, if you will, of what I wanted to create. I had this idea in my head. I've been developing it over 6 years at this point. And so I've been talking about it and talking about it. And my wife Julia is like, okay, let's, you know, put that idea into action or else it's going to be the thing that got away from you. So I'm like, cool, let's do it. So 2014, we started in 2013 filming content and delivering it on YouTube. And then 2014, we dedicated that year to launching this course. And it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life because nobody at this point had even tried to tackle this subject in a very deliberate, structured way. And so putting those ideas into a very clear format was really, really hard. So then we dedicated all of 2014 with a rigorous schedule of doing one chapter every week until it was done. And by the end of I think July or something, it was finally done. But it was very, very intense. And so what it was think of every variable that goes into a cocktail. Everything from the base spirit to the acid, to the sweetener, to the mixers, to the liqueurs, and identifying it down to the most basic and granular level as you possibly can, and then wrapping it all back together in balance in cocktail families. So for example, if we take even just citrus, we have lemon, lime, orange, pineapple, cranberry as a typical juices that we work with. So then I would say, all right, this is the pH level of every single citrus and every single juice we're using behind the bar. Here's the sugar content of every single one of these items. And this is the flavor profile you can expect. But a lime isn't a lime because there's variations of limes.
Mm.
So then I identified the most common variations of limes, tested the pH level on them, tested sugar content, flavor, and then go down to refined or verjus and vinegars and have those apply. So I went all the way down to refined acids, to tartaric, malic acid, citric acid, how they contribute to a cocktail, and then wrapped it all back up. Like, okay, now here's how you can use these variables. Same thing for sugars, same thing for base spirits. And so we just took this methodical, deep dive approach into every technique, and then we use cocktail families as a way of like, all right, now that you understand these ingredients, here's how you apply it. Simple substitutions. This is how it transforms a cocktail. And so it became this really incredible course, and it's still considered one of the best courses through liquor.com, even up to now. I think it's 5 or 6 years now. It's the number one for professional bartenders. So that was 2014. And then the barware, which you mentioned, was kind of a side thought. We kept getting the same question on the YouTube channel of, okay, what barware do you recommend? And at the time, Amazon didn't really have really good barware. They had some Boston shakers, but they didn't fit. And the reviews were terrible. And there was only 2 providers for them. So we're like, all right, let's make a Boston scenario.
Always leaks. Always, yeah.
Well, and like one of them was a 28 ounce on the big side and 8 ounces on the small side. So it was buried inside the other one. So it wouldn't actually functionally work. So we're like, oh, okay. So then we spent a little bit of time developing it, sent it off to China with the last of our money because we're self-employed at this point, and received it and sold out in 30 days. And so we're like, oh, this is cool. And so that's kind of what kickstarted the whole bar tool scenario. But even up to that point, when I was working behind the bar, I was taking that same methodical approach to efficiency and bar tools in that high pace environment and seeing what works, what didn't work, what broke, why. And so I had this 10 years of experience up to this point of like bad tools and how am I going to fix it? So then once we did that, that's where we stand in the marketplace. Like, all right, I've used everything out there. I've broken literally everything out there. How do I make ours better? And so that's kind of the angle that we take with all the bar tools that we produce is how can we improve some aspect of this tool to make it better? Mm-hmm. And so what you may see on our website may look like everybody else. I guarantee yours is better in some way. I'm very confident in saying that. So like, for you, you said your jiggers broke. I guarantee you our jiggers will not break because we have done...
They always split at the middle. They always do. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you look on most of the ones that you probably are working with or have worked with in the past, if you look down into the jigger itself and you see 3 dots inside of the cone, that is 3 spot welds that are holding that whole thing together. Everything else is ornamental. And that's the point of failure. And so what we do is we weld all the way around. If it has a ring, like the Japanese jiggers do, I don't think I have one with me, but we weld all the way around that ring on both sides. So that thing is never going to split. Right?
Yeah, if you're listening to this, you've seen these in a bar. It's one where it's like a small cup on top, big cup on bottom that they flip over.
Right. So yeah, so we kind of take that approach with all the tools. We welded on both sides here. And then I had a 300-pound guy stand on one, and he was like, I would not do this on any other jigger. And I was like, that's why we make them this way. Yeah. Nobody's ever going to do that behind a bar, but that's the level of construction that we take.
I've heard a lot of people say no one's ever going to do that behind a bar, and you're always surprised.
Fair enough, man. Fair enough.
Yeah. I think it'd be useful going back to that course that you put together, that first one, because it's very easy, I know as a guest, and I know me beginning, to get lost in like kind of the high flowery language. So I was kind of conceiving it as you were talking about the different citrus and acids. If you're someone at home listening, imagine a margarita, just a classic margarita, fresh lime, a good margarita at a local place where they use fresh juice. Now imagine that drink, you take that citrus out and you put in orange juice instead. Drastically different drink. That drink is not going to be balanced. It is going to be too sweet because every citrus, yes, when you taste just citrus, it's tart, but the difference between the tartness of an orange versus a lime versus a lemon versus a grapefruit is a huge, huge thing. Yeah.
It truly is. And if you've ever had margaritas in Mexico, they taste different from here. And the reason is because they're using different limes. So where you typically use Persian or Tahitian limes in the US, the big green limes that you find in the grocery store, and down there they use, I believe, a variation of like a key lime. So it's a different flavor profile. The acid hits a little bit different. There's a little bit different fragrances. And some of the ingredients that they use are slightly different as well. The Cointreau or the triple sec is very different. And so it adds all these different elements. So all of these things skew a cocktail just slightly in different directions. And so this is how the details of mixology cocktails make a big difference. All these small additions.
Sure. Do you ever have anyone just say like, it's just a drink. Just Put something in the glass and go for it.
It's funny, like I don't get that because we are so steeped in kind of mixology and craft cocktails that the
Mhm.
people that usually respond to us are in the similar vein.
I guess if someone thinks that, they're not following you online. Yeah.
It's very much a self-selected process for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, self selects out all the Budweiser drinkers out there. Um, okay, so you are developing this course. You get it to a point, and now it's one of the best selling courses. That is your first one. When I last looked, you had something like 10, 12, maybe more courses on there. So, what has been the evolution of adding those on, or is it splintering off the main course? How does that work?
So there's a couple different variations that we've done for courses, and some of them are a little bit more consumer focused about getting people into the excitement of making their own cocktails. So there's a lineup of some that are a little bit more friendly to home bartenders and home enthusiasts. Learn the basics. Here's the 5 cocktails that you should know, in my opinion, how to make them. Here's some of the small variables that you could tweak, like an old fashioned with white sugar versus demerara or brown sugar. You get slightly different toffee notes and that change. And so just building their confidence up to allow them to become curious and start asking questions and start exploring their own creativity is kind of how those are engineered. And then we have some that are much more focused for deep knowledge and understanding.
Mhm.
So really starting to explore really specific topics and getting to those granular techniques that we talk about and differences that can change a syrup, for example. And so we have the flavor manipulation series. I believe it's syrups, infusions, and bitters and tinctures. 3 different courses, but we have the same cocktails and ingredients for all 3 courses. So the whole point of that is to see how flavors develop in different ways with different techniques. So we're going to show you how to make an incredible syrup, but we're going to go really deep in technique on syrup. We're going to show you all the cool things that you do from sous vide to, toasting your spices beforehand or not. And so going really, really deep into syrup construction, we're going to use those same flavor profiles and see how they hit different on the cocktail side with infusions instead. So if you infuse the same strawberry, it's going to hit different than if you were to turn it into a strawberry syrup. But how? And then the same thing with the bitters. So it is taking that same cocktail, keeping it constant for the most part, and applying these different techniques to see what the end result is going to be and giving you the confidence to be able to do that as well. So that's a much deeper tool set and skill base. So that is our flavor manipulation series. And then we did one for non-alcoholic cocktails, kind of the 2 sides of it. One is enthusiast, buy this on the shelf, mix match, do your thing, make a cocktail. And the one for the hardcore enthusiast or professional is basically how to make your own base spirits from scratch. Non-alcoholic base spirits from scratch.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah.
It's an incredible course. And at the end of it, we made a Mai Tai, I think it was. And it was one of the best Mai Tais I've had with or without alcohol. It was phenomenal. And the minute you start creating non-alcoholic cocktails with the cocktail in mind instead of the ingredients in mind, it gives you so much more room to develop flavor inside of the same measurements. So it's hard for me to kind of describe how that works. But if you have 3 ounces of liquid, but each one is 2 ounces of rum, 1 ounce of lime, blah 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 blah. If you take that same approach but put 3 ounces, I want to make the best Mai Tai ever, you have a lot more control over the flavor and you can make a lot deeper flavor combinations inside of that same volume.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because you're not necessarily sacrificing 66% of the liquid in there to like necessarily booze.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
So,
No, that's cool.
yeah.
And just kind of clicking back into what you said there, I really like the idea of that bitters infusion syrup course.
hmm
I love things where you can see before after A/B tests to see how flavor differs one side to another. That's like
Yeah.
my brother is a big mead brewer, and so I went to one of their big
Oh, sure.
competitions, is Mead Stampede in Oklahoma City, and
hmm
one of their big interactive displays during that, they did, I think it was something like 30 different fruits, and they did it primary fermentation and then they put it in the secondary fermentation, and all same base mead, all same honey, and you got to taste what it was like if it was added before or after. Like And
Yeah.
I mean, some of them were delicious. Some of them, frankly, were disgusting because fermentation does do some weird things, especially when you're doing like guava and mead. But yeah, there's some that I like smelled and I was like, I'm not going back to that side of the table anymore. But yeah, no, it like there's no other visceral way to learn something than just like have that back to back or, do the infusion and then do it with the syrup. Like to see how it
Yeah.
changes things.
It's pretty incredible, man. And it really changed the way I look at cocktail development. And some of the best cocktails we've ever produced have come out of the knowledge of that series. And, just as a kind of a high level takeaway for anybody listening, is when you have a syrup, it's usually front palate. It usually hits big in the front and then tapers off. And then with the infusion, that is not front palate, it is more mid to late palate. So now you can start layering flavors in, right?
Mm.
Of I want my rosemary to hit mid to late palate. Cool. I'm going to do an infusion instead of a syrup. But in the front, I'm going to put that strawberry. So I'm going to get that strawberry up front and it's going to linger off into rosemary. And now I'm going to develop a bitters, and a bitters is what brings everything and ties it all together, right? So now I have bridges to flavors. And now you could layer that across multiple infusions, different lengths, different times, and you really have a lot more control over flavor development and how it develops on your palate than just initial pop. So that's kind of the takeaway.
I can always tell when I'm talking to someone who's crafted cocktails because it very rarely hear people describe flavor as a process through time. And people that have really focused on cocktail development, almost always, it's always that entry,
It's
mid, end. Like you describe it like it's a story that has like beginning, middle, end, and like little surprise. Whereas
mhm.
most people, it's just like tastes good. I didn't like it.
Yeah,
Like it's very
exactly.
binary. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
like I like that note about bitters. I had a bar mentor who described them as salt, something that you do occasionally
Mhm.
taste, maybe not necessarily should, but always ties it all together. Like that culinary idea.
Right. Yeah.
I am curious. So you mentioned, and I was interested if this has affected your business at all, the crafting of non-alcoholic cocktails. So I've definitely noticed my day job, I run a steakhouse in Omaha, Nebraska, and
Mhm.
you can tell that people are drinking less. It just like
Sure.
is very much a thing. And I was wondering if that had affected your business or if you'd noticed that at all.
It's definitely something. So I pay attention to the business and the bigger business of spirits and spirit consumption and cocktails. And I know that non-alcoholic cocktails are a much more rapidly growing segment of any bar or restaurant lineup. And I think it's personally incredible. I don't think it's really affected us as much because you still need the equipment to fashion those cocktails, those
Mm,
styles of drinks, right?
that makes sense. Yeah.
So you still need all those things. And this is something that we leaned in and identified on many years ago of like, okay, we believe this is going to be a trend. And so this helped develop those courses as well. So we fully embrace the non-alcoholic spirit-free movement. I rarely drink anymore these days unless I'm crafting courses or doing education. So I think it's a wonderful thing. And I think that the more skilled people are at developing these styles of cocktails, the better it's going to be for not only them, health wise, but from a bar and restaurant, their bottom line. Like this is a great profit center. And this is a way of including people into the conversation of hospitality that may have felt alienated before. So I see this as a lot of benefit to bars and restaurants in general.
That's a good point. Yeah, because before this trend, you walk into a bar and you can get orange juice, cranberry juice, pineapple juice, and like that's about it. Maybe
Right.
soda water if you want to look like you have a vodka soda or something, but
Right. Or some kind of unthought out, super acidic, super sugar bomb mojito, just whatever you happen to have in your mise en place to be able to put together maybe well,
sure, yeah. No, that's a good point. Yeah. No, I wonder too, like, because I've been trying to square this away because I also hear a lot of panic and all sorts of things. And I actually have been cutting back a lot on drinking too. And I feel better
Hmm.
doing that. And I
Yeah.
I do wonder, you think back to Prohibition and right before Prohibition, and yes, Prohibition was not anyone's cup of tea and it was not well executed and did not go well. But it's almost undeniable that before Prohibition, like there's a reason it happened. People were drinking too
Hmm.
much. And it may have led to all these speakeasies. It may have led to all this lost knowledge, but there did need to be kind of a hard interrupt because I forget the statistics, but it's something like every man, woman, and child was having like a gallon of whiskey a year, like something crazy. Like Like
Sure.
people were having too much fun, and it was the beginning of America. There wasn't much to do, so fair enough.
Right.
I have a feeling that we're going to look back in 20 years and say, man, they were having too much fun. Almost especially during COVID when there was not a lot to do. And I'm sure a lot of people are reacting to the fact that they overindulged when they had a little bit of time on their hands. And it's a rebalancing. So,
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Like, I feel like the world is always looking for vices, right? Things that are just going to scratch that itch. And I've actually looked into this a little bit, just anecdotally, in the past, and how this kind of transformed, because like the whole craft cocktail movement was really strong in like the 30s with tiki. And
mhm.
so that's kind of the OG of craft cocktails, using fresh juices, multiple layers of rums and drinks. And like that is mixology at its heart, is tiki. And so looking at kind of that and how that changed to like the 60s and 70s, where people weren't drinking it nearly as much, and then how that changed again with the renaissance of craft cocktails. And one of the stories that I heard is that generations push back on what their parents did, right?
Which is, yeah,
So if your
what
parents
my
were,
parents did was not cool. I'm not saying that personally, but, well, maybe, but
no, in general,
any kid is
if
gonna
you,
say that, like, I don't want to be like dad. What are you talking about? Yeah.
right. And so, like in the 70s, it was like my dad drank a lot or my parents drank a lot. And so now I'm going to push away from that. And hey, cocaine's cool. That's different.
Mhm.
Marijuana is different. And so they kind of transitioned more towards that. And then it flipped again. And now it's flipping to something else.
Mhm.
So it's going to be this cycle that continues. And there's always going to be a demand for vice.
Oh yeah. Have you ever heard of Edward Slingerland? He wrote a book called
No.
Drunk. So
Uh,
super, super cool guy. He was on the podcast probably about 20 episodes back. But his big theory on this is that, there's a reason that even at such a steep evolutionary cost, intoxication has survived. It does do something fundamental for humans or society. And it's him trying to
sure.
dig through what that is. And he's going through, the modern era. There's a lot of things that kind of are used to be check check boxes, good things for alcohol, like preserved things. It was easy to transport. It would be shelf stable, and before refrigeration, big plus. Before sanitation, big
Sure.
plus. Now we have cars and we have atomic submarines, and it's probably not the best idea to be a little blitzed
Right.
all the time. And he also is pointing to the fact that there are suburbs and it's hard to travel to go to the bars to get the things, but there's also this rising medical marijuana where people can have this intoxication without having to go out. It's a little bit less of a risk of abuse. So that's
Right.
like the risk benefit cost analysis has shifted some. And so we're seeing it. It's just a lagging
Yeah.
indicator of what's been happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to me to kind of pin that. And I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff of like of the social element of drinking and how that's going to evolve, right? Because as people spend more time on their phones and becoming more insular, then maybe going to the bar and drinking, being social, is going to be the counterbalance of that 10 years from now,
Sure, sure. It's like I go to bars and I drink non-alcoholic drinks just to get out and meet people, like just to be at a place where other people are expected to be. Yeah,
Sure.
that's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. It's a weird world we're living in. I feel like I'm getting
I'm
old
telling
saying
you.
that, but yeah. Speaking of bars, one thing you mentioned before we got on this call, and I thought it was pretty interesting, running bars is actually a whole beast unto itself.
Yeah. Yeah, it
So,
is.
to the budding bartender out there who's thinking about starting their bar, or the bartender out there who's being promoted to management and maybe it's a new restaurant, or, maybe they're in over their head. What are the 80/20s, the things that you really need to pay attention to and focus on to get a successful bar program growing?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, because I think there's not a lot of training when it comes to that person.
No, they just
I
threw
don't
me
know
in.
how you, that's literally the question I was going to ask you. And that's kind of what happened to me. I got lucky and I had a decent mentor, and I cannot praise mentors enough. And he's was somebody I worked with before as a bartender, became a manager near where I was working. And then him and I kind of talked, and he was like, all right, you're in charge of my bar program. I'm going to show you how this works. And so he laid it all out to me. He gave me the tools I needed and gave me the insight I needed to start making my own decisions on how to run a better bar program. So if you are a new bartender or just got your first management job, there's a significant skill shift that has to happen, right? And so not only from the customer side, but like now you have to start speaking business. Now you have to start speaking numbers. You have to start understanding cost structures. And so, like putting your tins down and grabbing a laptop or a tablet, that's one of the big things that you should be prepared for. Start small, like learn how to cost a cocktail. Your most popular cocktail on the menu, take a stab at it.
Hmm.
Understand what the price of serving that particular cocktail is. Then you start to understand margins and how to hit margins. And then, if you're a bartender and you're hoping to open your own restaurant, the biggest thing I can tell you is go to a chain restaurant, go to a corporate restaurant where you're going to learn how to run a successful business.
Hmm.
That is the number one thing I would recommend. It's going to suck your soul out of your head, but you are going to learn how to run a business.
In defense of that move, and just to add my 2 cents, it hasn't
Yeah.
sucked my soul out of my head yet. So
there are great games.
no,
There are phenomenal.
I jokingly said they threw me in, and I did have a couple jobs where I was quote unquote manager, and I was really just babysitter, and I made every mistake. Thank God I made it when I had no real responsibility. I got hooked up with a great small chain that has some structure but not too much structure, and they happened to need help in the back of house. I'd never worked a back house management role, but they said they trained me, and it was the hardest 2 or 3 years of my life, and so grateful I did that, because the pressure of knowing it's not like the bar, everything's going to go bad. There's no room
Yeah.
for error. You have to have systems for ordering. You have to be able to take a day off, which means someone else has to understand those systems. You got to be able to schedule. You got to know everyone's phone number, like on and on and on. But walking accidentally backwards into a job that had structure was not part of the plan, and it probably saved my restaurant career because it got
Honestly,
me through. Yeah.
the power of structure and systems is so underrated because a lot of us kind of fly by the seat of our pants. We address one fire at a time. But if you have a system in place and a structure of how to deal with things and repetition, it is the difference between, I think one of your guests said, the difference between like working and scalability, right?
Mhm.
If you are in your business putting out fires, you're an employee. But if you can set up a system where there are no fires, now you're running a business. So like that is a huge, significant mental shift that a lot of people unfortunately don't arrive at, but I think is really, really critical. And so finding that somewhere is super, super helpful. And, somebody that can walk you through the numbers and truly understand how to affect change from a profit center is incredibly, incredibly powerful.
Like that.
So, and then one other thing, and I think this is something that a lot of people don't even realize, is if you're running a beverage program, there are layers to the beverage industry that are not obvious. So, like when you go into negotiations with your spirit vendor, and let's say you're doing Southern, for example, I know they're one of the biggest. They have many different factions inside of Southern, and you want to really focus on specific houses, right? Like Heaven's Hill has a portfolio of spirits that they represent. They have their own people with their own budgets inside of that. So if you are looking to get allocations of anything from the Buffalo Trace or Heaven Hill profile, then you should probably tailor a lot of your inventory to them.
Or if it's all the same to you, what's in the Manhattan, as long as it's good quality, maybe pick one of theirs so that it moves, that sort of thing. Yeah,
exactly. And then you start getting things like support from your vendors. And I know you all know what that means.
We all need support. Yes.
Support is wonderful. And then allocations. And so like pinning your inventory allocations and your buying decisions to very specific portfolios is another way to really unlock profitability inside of your bar and give yourself a network of people to talk to. And that's another thing that I highly recommend is developing your professional network with everybody, like your spirit vendors, the suppliers you're working with, the POS people, like your payment processors, like develop as many people in your network as possible, because there's going to be a point where you may want to consider a career change.
That's a good point.
Something that happened to me. And it was because of my network that I was able to find better jobs, quicker jobs, or something completely outside of my space, because I had a strong network of people that believed in me and I had a good relationship with. Like the power of a network should be day one. Like you should actively be developing your network the first day you have any power inside of your restaurant.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, I'm going to build on that point too. Even if you are not planning on leaving, being the guy who treats everyone with just a modicum of respect can pay dividend. Like
100%.
Over the last week, we had an issue where we ran out of linens. I mean, New Year's Eve, it's going to happen. It was just We had 400 covers. What are you going to do? And so just being able to text him and just honestly being like, hey, I know it's not normal delivery. This is where we're at. We probably can't wait till Monday. It happened, And again, it's a restaurant. Something happens every single day. One of the fridges on the line went out. And, I've always been, upfront and honest and nice to the repair guy. And, you know, when he tells me that something can wait for a month and he'll have it done before it breaks again, I trust him. And so I know he'll show up on a dime, and you never know when you'll need help. Yeah.
Right. And when I say developing a network, it's not about like using people, it's about developing that genuine connection with people. Like,
Mhm.
hey, you're in a jam? Cool, I can help you. Or just being hospitable and a genuinely good person goes a long way, man.
It does. It does. And yeah, you never know. The awesome bartender that gives you a hand one day, you may end up in management and you may need a head bartender. It's such a small industry. And I do want to go
Right.
back to the liquor reps because I want to make sure it's clear. We kind of joked around about support and laughed about that. And every state is different in what is allowed and not allowed. But
Yep.
even not like providing discounted products or bringing display things depending on whether or not it's legal, just in terms of staff training, getting a good relationship
Yes.
with them, that changes things because it's hard to sell things. I'm primarily wine in our spot, but it's hard to sell bottles that we don't know what they taste like, and
Right. Yeah.
that's what
And
they're
it's
there,
incredible. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, and like when you're in that buying position, like I don't know if it's the same where you're at, but like when I was buying here in California, they have combos every year, every month,
Mm.
and they're different. And it's like buy this, get one free of this other bottle. And so I would actively, they knew when I would buy that I want to know what combos are because that's free money for my profitability.
Thank you again for listening. If you're enjoying this show or getting any value from it, please subscribe to the show. It really does help us grow. As a side note, we are going from 1 episode a week to 2 episodes a week in 2026. So every Tuesday and Thursday. See you there. I'm really glad that you did mention too the different houses because it's something that I've always, told any bar manager or new bartenders kind of heading out towards a buying position. There's no reason you would ever suspect that like Jim Beam also owns El Jimador. Like these houses could be
Yeah,
huge. And like when you find these connections, you can really like if you are a place that primarily is whiskey heavy like us, you will still have a margarita. And like you can work that out where it's like maybe El Jimador is in the well where it's affordable and it's just our like go-to margarita. And yes, it's Jim Beam, but also Jim Beam knows a lot, like there I heard from their like international rep that it's like Kentucky has 5 million people, 4 million barrels of whiskey, and their company owns 3 million or something crazy like that, where it's like their house controls bookers and it controls it X and Y and Z.
yeah,
Like, yeah. So you can really start piecing together different things and you can make it work in your favor as long as you know to look out for it.
exactly. Yeah, and so like the biggest thing is like most restaurateurs that I've talked to have one point of contact inside of every distributor, and that one person of contact is not necessarily the best person to order from because your general salesperson doesn't understand that there's incentives and bonuses and structures inside of each house that a rep can pull from. So if you're ordering Jim Beam products and you have a inventory stacked with Jim Beam products, you should have that Jim Beam rep, not your just general Southern rep, because they're not going to know what's happening. You need to have a Jim Beam rep, and they're going to be able to tap into all the incentives inside of their structure in order to get you the best deals, the best opportunities, the best marketing, publicity, whatever it is. They are much more empowered to move needles inside of your program. And not understanding that takes a long time to understand. And that's where you really can leverage a beverage program significantly, in my opinion,
Yeah.
is
And
once you understand the power of a house.
you it's weird when you start off, you don't even know the questions you need to ask, like because there's so much that can happen if you're just willing to ask the question like, is this possible? And like,
Yeah.
let's be honest too, this isn't a magic like this isn't going to fix everything. You ask, is this possible? And the answer is going to be no, 9 times out of 10. But that one in
Yeah.
10 is going to be a pretty magical, oh, okay. Like I
Yeah.
PGA came through Tulsa when I was running the beverage program at Mahogany, the same place I'm with now. And dude,
Uh-huh.
it's crazy. It was literally like I could walk there in about 300 feet. So like the busiest I've ever seen it. But I
Sure.
still remember met with my southern rep, the manager of the fine wine district, and I said, Oklahoma's a different state, very restrictive laws. There's not a lot they can do with bonus programs, but in terms of
Right.
getting in inventory or like, getting back inventory, they have some legal levers they can pull. And I said it
Yeah.
would be cool to run a Farniente feature. And there's not enough Farniente in the state, but it would just be cool. I would do that if I could pull that off. And he was just like, I would do that. You tell me and I'll make it happen. And it's like it had happened. And it was
Yeah.
great for everyone, and you just don't know till you ask too.
Right. And once again, this is the power of the network of
Mhm.
like letting them know your intentions, how you can support them in their business. Like this is where relationships really start coming into play is when you can recognize or when you can see opportunities and be able to ask for them and communicate them. And you're right, that does not happen overnight.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Do you have any crystal ball predictions? Anything you think's coming in the, mixology world? Anything you're excited about?
I don't know. Like, I'm kind of uncertain about the future of mixology, and this is something that I've been kind of like pondering on and not really developing any kind of like real outcomes on it. And part of me is like, is craft cocktails over? Have we reached that point of saturation or oversaturation where people are just kind of, they want comfort, they want simple, they want the things they know? Are we to that point, or is there still room and excitement for the world of craft cocktails? And I don't know yet, but the fact that non-alcoholic cocktails are taking such a significant market share right now has me thinking along those lines. That is definitely not a prediction, just something I'm keeping an eye on.
Mhm. A question
I
mark, if you
think that,
will. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Just like cutting edge culinary food and, a lot of these new style of restaurants, there's probably always going to be that for cocktails. But and if we look at it globally, I think there's still a ton of room and opportunity in that space of craft cocktails and mixology when we look globally for sure. But I think, you know, innovative spirits and new spirits are always going to be exciting. Mezcal is a prime example of that. I think the world of whiskey is going to change dramatically in the
Double click
next
on
three to
that.
5 years.
Yeah, double click on that.
Yeah, man. I mean, just talking about what we're seeing in the marketplace and the impact tariffs have had on global distribution of American whiskey, like a lot of these houses are going to have a glut of backstock that they're just going to sit on and age and just let it mature. And there's going to be spin-off brands from that inventory. And there's going to be these cool experimental phases in whiskey and like there's going to be some crazy things happening in the world of whiskey, in my opinion. Like I heard that one house is not even going to do production for a year right now, the way it is. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like literally, like what does that mean? Like that's insane.
A whole year off.
So yeah. And so we're going to see some interesting things as a result of this. And I'm not trying to be political. I'm just looking at the trends of, how does this manifest in 3, 5, 10, 20 years? It's going to be cool. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Now, have you ever looked into Dusty Booze, Aaron Goldfarb's book?
No, I haven't.
I think you would love it, actually. It's all about the hunt for out of production old ancient spirits and like the story behind people who look for these bottles. But
sure,
his whole premise when it came to whiskey was, there were people that believed that the drinking trends would change because there's always that question, why are all these old bottles around? Like who was making all this whiskey when no one was buying it? And it sounds like we're like almost in a cyclical way coming back into that where people are drinking less. It's not exporting more, but we'll have this production. It's like in 50 years, are there going to be people hunting bottles from the 2025s when there was just too much and everyone just put them in their cellars, well, yeah. Or all the great houses will shut down and we'll have all this like weird consolidation. And yeah, there's a lot of different ways it could go, but I'm hopeful. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm hoping for the positive of like really cool, reasonable, world-class whiskeys. That would be amazing to see.
That's the hope.
Yep.
I think you're spot on with that. There's always going to be room for more different interesting spirits. I don't know if mezcal is going to be the last word there, though. I feel like there's got to be a spirit that comes about that's less smoky, because it's like the rise of Scotch popularity. People they love it or they hate it, and the people that hate it, which I love it. But I mean, I've tried like 3 times to put a mezcal cocktail on the menu, and I just hand sell. It's not going to work. people send it back. It just is what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, it's a polarizing cocktail ingredient for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
I have a theory that we're going to see a lot more local, and not just in spirits, but definitely spirits. We had a big push for local beer. I think local ingredients too. Menus that have like locally sourced honey, or like different elements celebrating local producers where you can. I feel like that's a trend I've been seeing more and more. And
Oh, that's cool.
yeah,
I could definitely get behind that.
yeah, I'm actually in talks right now putting some local drinks on the menu because every time I go out, I see it. I'm like, I think this is a thing. I think this is where it's at.
Yeah, yeah. We tried to do that at one of the restaurants I was working at, where we tried to basically contract our own beer production. And we were in talks, and it unfortunately kind of fizzled out towards the end. But I thought that would be really cool. Of like, no, we did our own barrel program for whiskey there, and I was like, okay, cool. Let's put our stamp across a lot of different possibilities. So we were really close to doing that with North Coast Brewing, who makes Scrimshaw and a couple other ones.
Oh, I love North Coast.
That
Their
kind
their prankster is one of my wife's
yeah,
favorite beers, except you can only have one because it like
right.
deceptively it tastes like it's low ABV, but it is not a low ABV. It
It
it will
sure is
knock
not,
you
man.
over. Yeah. Prankster
Yeah, I
is
have
a
to give it.
good name for that beer.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that'd be cool to see, like your own house wines and like just kind of work your way through a beverage program like that on local. I think that would be super cool.
Yeah. Wouldn't
Yeah,
work with, well, I mean, it could work with the wines. Yeah. If you remember Nebraska, if you look at the map, it is right in the center. So it is
right,
the most continental of all the climates in the US. So like no Vitis vinifera is ever going to survive here unaided. So
sure.
the wine we
Yeah,
have here is either imported grapes or American hybrids. And I've always enjoyed trying local wines and giving it a shot, but there's a reason California and Oregon. There's a reason they are the go-tos, but yeah,
world class. Yeah.
for sure. Before we get to the end, I have to ask you, I saw some information that you put out, or I forget how I came across it, but about the accuracy of jiggers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I was wondering what made you start wondering about, is this jigger actually the 30 milliliters it says it is? And like how did you go about testing that?
So this was back early on, and once again, that kind of scientific brain just kind of kicked in. Of like everyone assumes that these tools used for measuring are all standardized. Like that's a huge assumption. Let's figure out if that's right or not. And I think it all started when I noticed variation in cocktails, in how they taste and how they represent themselves from, it could be the same bar, different bartenders using their own tools. Like that is interesting to me. So then I started investigating it, and I used like the most common jiggers at the time, and I realized that they were up to 30% variance off of standardized measurements. And I was like, that's something nobody's talking about. And so, this is kind of goes back to like just any assumption that we can make on, things that people just take for granted. Let's kind of take a look at it. Let's see if that's valid or not. And so that's kind of what started with that. But yeah, it was pretty stark and pretty interesting from somebody that runs a beverage program that investigates variance in my inventory and why I'm not hitting numbers,
And
I'm
hope
like,
it's not a human cause. Yes.
right, exactly. I'm like, think the best, but figure out if there's any other way of doing it. So that's kind of what started it. And I think the biggest offender for me was, and I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but once again, this kind of goes back to why we started our company, is OXO. The little stamped out plastic and metal ones that you can stack, they were my favorite, but they were like 30% off on a handful of different marks at the time. And so I was like, well, that sucks. And, if I'm trying to hit numbers and I'm trying to, you're doing hundreds of cocktails with 30% differences, that's going to add up.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
it's,
kind of what started
I'm
all of
guessing
it.
it's not 30% under either, because at that,
Well,
yeah, that,
did what?
okay. I was going to say at
Which
that
is also
point,
a market.
the guest would probably say something.
Right, exactly. If you're using some really powerful ingredients like chartreuse or Luxardo, that's going to make a big difference in your cocktail.
Half and half
Not
green.
even,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So it wasn't even a matter of like small differences that nobody's going to notice. Like this will change how a cocktail is presented and tastes to a final guest and stuff. So it was just one of those things of like, oh, okay, that sucks. let's fix that, shall we? So
Mhm.
we do a significant calibration check on everything that we do, and our jiggers go all the way down to a bar spoon and every quarter ounce measurement. So quarter ounce all the way up to 2 ounce, every quarter ounce in between. Yeah, we're very deliberate about the bar tools that we make because of my experience behind the bar.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I mean, and that's cool too that you have that kind of scientist mind. You're able to kind of like, is this right? And, having these concepts like precision and accuracy, like you may be very precise and you're always hitting the ounce and a half on here, but your accuracy is off. You're precisely wrong with what you're doing.
You're precisely wrong. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it becomes really interesting when you have bartenders that bring in their own tools,
hmm Which
right? Because,
I mean, it does make sense. If they are taking on the ownership, they're trying to present the professional attitude of a professional chef. Say, no chef would
of
show up
course,
without his knives. That'd be crazy.
that'd be
Yeah.
crazy. So, like, this is where it starts to really start to matter, though. Is like if somebody's 30% over and the other person's 20% under on the same mark, now we're very different.
Mhm.
So, and I'm not advocating everybody having the same equipment, but that's part of the consideration as well of
Mhm.
running a program. Like, okay,
Like, to say it another way, if you are going to go through the whole process of getting your own equipment, bringing it with you, maybe have a care and think, is it good, accurate, quality equipment?
right,
Yeah.
exactly, yep,
Yes.
absolutely.
We'll just clip it there and turn this into an ad.
Sorry to promote. This is the whole beginning of why we did what we did.
For sure, for sure. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you some of those classic questions like favorite cocktail, favorite spirit. Like, what when you're making drinks, when you're going out to drink, what are you reaching for usually?
So there's a couple different ways I do this. My tried and true, if I'm making one for myself at home, a Manhattan to my specs. I love that. It's a classic drink, and I have a lot of fond memories. So there's a lot tied up to that. If I'm going out with friends, and I know this is a fairly established bar, they got a good program, they got crazy good cocktails, my answer is going to change because I want to see the beverage program through that person's eyes. So I'm going to ask them, what are you excited about on your menu right now?
Mhm.
I want that. And tell me why that's so cool. And so I want to experience their hospitality, their thought process through their eyes. And that gives me excitement. I'm like, okay, cool. I want to try that now. So that's usually how I approach like going out to a really good cocktail bar. If I'm just going out to a neighborhood bar, once again, that's going to change. And I'm probably just going to get something beer, maybe a sip of whiskey,
Mhm.
and that's so I kind of tailor it to where I'm going and stuff. But my favorite thing is just to be a fly on the wall and experience hospitality through someone else's eyes. That's usually how I go to restaurants. And
Nice.
same thing goes with food too.
Yeah. No, I kind of track with that. It's almost exactly one to one for where I am. If I don't have the mixers for Manhattan or like a old fashioned, whiskey on the rocks is always easy. And it's always like good, like I'm not buying cheap stuff. And if you're in
Yep.
a dive bar, beer and a shot, you're not asking for a mojito unless you're a crazy person. And you like if you're at a new place, and usually I'm at a new place that's exciting because my wife wanted to try it out or something, like why would you not want to see like what's good here? Like what do you
Yeah.
recommend? Yeah. Otherwise you're just getting the same thing over and over again. It's
Right.
bush light. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Awesome. Well, Chris, for the listener at home, where could they go to find out more about you, follow you, and learn about what you do?
Yeah, so if you take a look anywhere online at A Bar Above, and that's our handle across all social media, shop.abarabove.com for the website. You'll see everything there from the courses to the barware and even the blog as well. Basically, A Bar Above anywhere you'll find us. And we've been doing it for a while, so we've kind of cornered the market on that handle. And then, yeah, I think that's a great place to start.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And if you are driving or listening to this at home, didn't have something to write that down with, that will be in the show notes as always. Kudos on cornering the market for a bar above. There's like one there's like one lady in Arizona that's got a serves you right consulting gig. I'm like, fair enough. Fair enough. It is three
Wow, okay.
common words. I'm a little late to the game. You got it. You win. Yeah. Chris, it was a real pleasure talking to you today.
You
So
as well. And if I can add one more thing,
oh
and I
sure,
did
yeah.
podcasting for a while, and that is if you're a listener, write a review. Like
Oh
this
yeah.
is really hard work, putting a podcast together and doing it over and over again. Getting that feedback from listeners is so helpful and so critical. And just helps to fuel your creativity, your excitement, and all of that. If you are listening to Andrew, please, this is a great way to give back and to show your support. So leave a review, and I know personally how much it means. So I'll be doing that when I get off here, Andrew.
Oh, I appreciate it.
For anybody else.
Yeah, and if you don't want to leave one for me, go to the Mixology Talk podcast and go leave one for him. That's okay. He's been doing this a lot longer than me, and he has had some cool guests on. Mixing with beer, I didn't get a chance to listen to, but I'm gonna check that out. Like, yeah,
that's a good one.
Some of them I'm like, ooh, this is some good stuff here. So the well goes deep. Honestly, it is work, but I don't know, and I'd be interested to hear how you feel. Every time I talk to someone, I get nervous beforehand, just like a little jitters. It's exciting. You've never met this person, you never interacted with them. But after I've gotten off the call, I'm done talking to them, I always feel like $1,000,000. I always learn something. I always meet someone new. I haven't had a jerk yet, or maybe someday I'll be like, not always. There's that one dude, Jim, But I've always had a good experience so far. The people that are willing to put themselves out there and talk are my kind of people.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. Like, I always feel like an endorphin rush after a call and excited and like, you won't believe, like, tell my wife, you won't believe who I talked to. It was so cool. Like this, that, and the other. Like, give my mom the show note, or my wife the show notes, basically.
I do have a theory. I do think that in this day and age of smartphones, the fact that we, for 1 hour, have sat down our phones and have talked to another person, we are recreating what life was like before phones came along, and we are just riding that high. Whereas all we'd have to do this is lock our phones up and go talk to a loved one for an hour. But instead, we log on the internet and send Calendly invites and do all this just so we can connect with another person. But
maybe also, that's like, I don't know about you, but like the depth of conversation that usually comes in a podcast is deeper than like most of the interactions I have on a daily basis. So we're able to connect in a deeper way and have more interesting conversations versus my normal day-to-day life. That's also goes into exactly what you're saying as well. Just like we were having a little bit more of a deeper philosophical conversation about things that genuinely interest both of us. So I love it. And unfortunately we stopped ours, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I mean, there is that point, like, there is no distraction. Like, it would be weird if you showed up knitting. I would don't know how I would handle that. But, yeah, like, or if you're like, well, hey, I've actually, I'm washing the dishes, but I can still talk while we're doing this. Be like, you maybe like we've missed the point of this,
So something to confess to you, Andrew. I've been doom scrolling this whole time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. Well, I didn't notice because I've been sending emails. So. I'm gonna pull this one to a stop. It was a pleasure to meet you, Chris.
You as well, man. I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for listening to Serves You Right. Episodes of this show come out every Tuesday and Thursday. If you have not had a chance, please go and check out the website, servesyouRightPod.com. You can find all past episodes and a contact form in case you need to get in touch with me. And soon, so much more. All right, that's about it. Thank you.